Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Monday, March 2, 2026. And today we are doing something a little bit different. Usually we take a broad topic, like AI or climate change or economics, and we drill down. But today we are looking at a single human life. We are looking at a trajectory that bends time, geography, and mindset in a way that I think is going to genuinely surprise you.
It is a case study, really, a case study in radical transformation. We are looking at the life, the philosophy, and the writings of a man named Kevin Jarvis.
And to set the scene for you, I want you to hold two images in your head simultaneously, because this is the tension that drives this entire deep dive. Image number one is the cockpit of a 747. It is high-tech, it is sterile, it is pressurized. It's a world of absolute command and control cruising at 30,000 feet. That is Kevin's past.
Right, and then image number two is the muddy, clay-heavy soil of a village in Transylvania, Romania, specifically a village called Samartin. You're planting garlic by hand, you are heating your house with wood you chopped yourself, and you're listening to the wind to find water. And that is Kevin's present.
So the question is, how do you get from A to B? How does a man who spent his life mastering, command and control transition to a philosophy of surrender and connection? And more importantly, why should we care?
We should care because Jarvis represents a shift that a lot of us are feeling the need for. I mean, we are all a little bit stuck in the cockpit of modern life. We're overscheduled, overstimulated, trying to control everything. Jarvis actually ejected from that life and built something totally new on the ground. He calls it the Earthway.
And we have a massive stack of sources for this. I mean, we really went down the rabbit hole here. We've got his Substack posts, which are these incredibly vulnerable essays. We have his autobiography. We've got notes on his PhD in ecopsychology. And then we have this fascinating collection of fictionalized stories he calls The Muddy Way, which projects his life into the future, all the way to 2055.
Which creates this really rich tapestry for us to look at. We have the factual biography, the dates, the locations, the career. But then we have the mythologized version of his life, where he uses fiction to explore the deeper truths that maybe raw facts just can't quite capture.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack this synthesis. We're going to look at how he blends Catholic schooling, Lakota mentorship, Alan Watts' philosophy, and, wait for it, Jimmy Buffett lyrics.
Yeah, the Jimmy Buffett connection is surprisingly profound, which we will definitely get into.
And we are also going to talk about the elephant in the room. This guy who lives in a Transylvanian village and talks about Earth energy, yet he is absolutely obsessed with artificial intelligence. He uses an AI named Grok as a mirror looking into a mirror.
It's a really unique take on human-AI synthesis. Instead of AI replacing the human, he is using it to deepen the human experience.
All right, let's just get right into it. Segment 1, the pilot and the crash. We have to start at the beginning to really understand the magnitude of the shift here. Kevin Jarvis, born in 1960 in Southern California, and right off the bat, there's a detail in his biography that just stopped me cold. He started flying airplanes at the age of 15.
Literally a boy pilot. He actually had his solo in an airplane before he even had his driver's license.
I just want to pause on that for a second.
Oh.
Age 15, I didn't even have a learner's permit for a car at 15.
Exactly. He was flying a plane alone before he was legally allowed to drive a car down the street. If you think about the neural architecture that builds in a developing brain at that age, it's wild. At 15, most kids are dealing with the messy, ambiguous social hierarchy of high school. Kevin is thousands of feet in the air, operating a machine that requires absolute precision.
It's a world of binary outcomes. You're flying or you're crashing. The switch is on or it's off. There's no middle ground.
Right, there is no maybe in aviation. If you have ambiguity at altitude, people die. So he spends his formative years training his brain to completely eliminate gray areas. This instills a very heavy left brain dominance. It's all about checklists, schedules, and absolute control over your environment.
But he describes his youth as this kind of dual existence. On one side, he had this rigid Catholic schooling, nuns, rulers, Latin chants, conformity. But on the other side, he found the mountains.
Yeah, the beauty of the mountains in Southern California. Skiing, fishing, hiking, and hunting. That was his escape from the rigidity. But even then, there was a tension. He was seeking the wild, but his mind was being trained for the checklist.
And the checklist won, at least for a very long time. He becomes a professional pilot. He flies for Flying Tigers and then FedEx. And looking at his trajectory, it reads like a restless search. He starts there in Southern California, and then he moves to Washington State, then to Colorado, to New England, down to Florida, up to Alaska, over to South Dakota.
That wandering phase is significant, especially the 10 years he spent in Alaska. That is where the wilderness really started to seep in on a deeper level, but he was still very much the pilot. He was still the captain in charge.
He has this quote about that era of his life that I love. He says he used to rule his world from a payphone.
That phrase really sticks with you, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that specific era of the itinerant pilot. Living in hotels, intense schedules, high-pressure environments. You are the commander of the ship, but you're completely disconnected from the Earth itself. You're managing your entire life remotely.
He was living the dream, technically speaking, flying heavy metal over Japan, China, Singapore. He was at the absolute top of the hierarchy. And then, in a single moment, the universe just pulls the rug out from under him.
The crash.
But it wasn't an airplane crash.
No, and that is the real irony of his story. He didn't fall out of the sky. It was 1999. He was in Taipei, and he suffered a severe physical injury. He snapped his sacrum.
Ouch. I mean, just hearing that makes my spine hurt.
It was a devastating injury, and the immediate aftermath is that he is medically retired. He is grounded permanently. And for someone whose entire identity is wrapped up in the statement, "I am a pilot," that is a form of psychological death.
He asks the question explicitly in his writings. Who am I if not a pilot?
This is your classic hero's journey descent, the stripping away of the ego. When you have outsourced your self-worth to your job title, to the uniform, to the external validation of being the captain, and then the medical board just stamps retired on your file, who is actually left?
He didn't just stay in the States and mope about it, though. That's when he moved to Sweden.
Right, he spent 20 years in Scandinavia before he finally arrived in Transylvania. And those 20 years are crucial. He talks about the long dark of those Swedish winters.
I can't even imagine. I get bummed out if it rains for 3 days straight here.
Try 20 hours of darkness a day. But he frames it as a cocoon. When the lights go out, you literally can't look outside anymore. You are forced to look inside. That darkness stripped away the last remnants of the pilot ego because, frankly, no one in a Swedish village cares that you used to fly 747s. You were just a guy sitting in the dark like everyone else.
And it was during this time back in Sweden, right at the end of those 20 years, that he got inspired to formalize everything he was going through. He decided to get his PhD in ecopsychology.
Which is such a fascinating field. It's the study of the relationship between human beings and the natural world, but through a psychological lens. It basically posits that our psyche is not separate from our environment. So if the Earth is sick, we are sick. If we are disconnected from the Earth, we are mentally unwell.
He says that getting that PhD kind of brought together everything he had learned from his mentors. Which brings us to segment 2. Because he is stripped of the pilot identity, he's in the dark of Sweden studying ecopsychology, and he starts filling that void with a new set of teachers. And let me tell you, this list is eclectic.
It is completely wild. You have a Lakota elder, a survivalist tracker, a British philosopher, an indigenous poet, and Jimmy Buffett.
Let's start with the Lakota elder, Burt Rooks. He met Burt back in South Dakota during his wandering years, right?
Yes. And this relationship seems to be the absolute bedrock of his new worldview. Burt wasn't just teaching him rituals, he was teaching him a completely new operating system for reality.
One of the core concepts he learned from Burt is Wopala. Now, I have heard this translated as Thanksgiving, but it seems much deeper than just saying grace before dinner.
Oh, much deeper. Wopala is about the circle of reciprocity. Burt explained that when we give thanks, when we genuinely give thanks, we generate a psychic energy flow toward creation. And creation, in turn, reciprocates. It is an active exchange.
But it's not transactional, right? It's not like, I give you $5, you give me a birder.
No, it's highly relational. If the circle is broken, if we stop giving thanks and we stop receiving the true gifts of the earth, we might still extract the physical resources, but we don't get the spiritual nourishment. He also participated in specific rituals with Burt, like the Inipi, the Sweat Lodge, and learned the concept of Mikakuye Oyasin, which means all my relations, the interconnectedness of everything.
Burt also had this teaching that I think is so incredibly healthy, especially for a recovering perfectionist pilot. It's the concept of the 51%.
Oh, this is critical. Coming from a Catholic background where the goal is often moral perfection, being 100% good, and a pilot background where 100% accuracy is the minimum legal standard, Burt's teaching was radical. He told Kevin that humans shouldn't aim for 100% light.
Why not, though? Isn't being totally good the ultimate goal?
Burt argued that aiming for 100% light is impossible, and it's actually dangerous because it creates a massive shadow. If you try to be all light, you repress your darkness, and that darkness inevitably comes out sideways. You see it in people who try to be too pure and end up committing terrible acts in secret.
So what is the alternative he offered?
Bert said, aim for 51%. Just tip the scales slightly toward the light. Acknowledge your shadow. Know your dark side intimately, and keep it in balance.
That is so liberating for the listener to hear, I think. You don't have to be a perfect saint. You just have to be 51% decent.
Exactly. It allows you to actually be human. It integrates our animal nature rather than trying to constantly transcend it or destroy it.
And alongside Bert, during his 10 years in Alaska and Colorado, that was the time he started going to Tom Brown Jr., the famous tracker.
Yes, and he credits Tom Brown with really waking him up. He learned tracking, but the biggest takeaway was a fundamental shift in perception, literally how he uses his eyes. Remember, pilots use focal vision. You are scanning gauges, looking for traffic, locking onto a runway. It's narrow, it's predatory, and it's highly stressful. It triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight.
And Tom Brown taught him wide-angle vision.
Peripheral vision. It's about softening your gaze, taking in the whole landscape at once, the movement of the leaves at the very edges of your vision, the horizon line, without focusing tightly on any single thing.
Is this something you can actually do in daily life? Like, can our listeners try this?
Right now, while you are listening to this, stare at a point straight in front of you, but then consciously expand your awareness to what is on your far left and your far right. Don't move your eyes at all. Just expand your field of attention.
Okay, I am doing it now. I actually feel my shoulders dropping a little bit.
Because it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. It biologically relaxes you. It connects you to the broader movement of nature rather than separating you from it. Jarvis connects the lack of this vision to what he calls EarthMisery, which is the baseline stress of modern disconnection.
So he is moving from focal vision as a pilot to wide-angle vision on the Earthway. He's moving from 100% control to 51% balance. And then he brings in Alan Watts, John Trudell, and Jimmy Buffett.
The synthesis of these figures is brilliant. He says he listened to Alan Watts for 10 years. From Watts, and also the indigenous activist and poet John Trudell, he internalized the unity of opposites, the idea that life is a sine wave. You literally cannot have the peak without the valley. Ups and downs are part of one continuous process.
And from Buffett. I mean, usually when people think of Jimmy Buffett, they associate him with margaritas, bad Hawaiian shirts, and tourists.
True. But Kevin treats Jimmy Buffett's lyrics with the same reverence he gives to Zen koans. He cites breathe in, breathe out, move on as a core philosophy. It's not party music to him, it's a survival mechanism.
There is a specific song, One Particular Harbor, that comes up again and again in his writing.
It becomes his metaphor for spiritual arrival. Buffett sings about a harbor so far but yet so near, where he sees the days fade away. For Kevin, that is not just a vacation spot. It is a state of being where he finally truly stops running.
Which brings us to where he actually stopped running. So Martin, Transylvania, the present reality.
The setting is quite a visual. Imagine these ancient Saxon houses with red tile roofs. Some are blazing red, some are covered in thick moss. The Carpathian Mountains are rising in the distance. It's rugged, it's real.
And he has these specific properties he refers to by number. Number 4 is the Earthway residence, which is restored. And number 5 is the ruin, or the barn.
The ruin is such a powerful symbol in his work. It's this broken structure that he is slowly rehabilitating. It represents the self, right? He's taking something broken by time and turning it into a center of productivity and community.
Now, I want to go back to something we touched on in the intro, the 54 senses. Because when I hear applied eco-psychology, I usually think of abstract theory. But Kevin is talking about extremely physical practice, and he claims we have 54 senses.
He does.
I went to public school. I'm pretty sure I learned we have exactly 5. Sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Maybe 6 if you count the ability to sense when your boss is angry.
Standard Western thought absolutely limits it to 5. But eco-psychology, and Jarvis is heavily drawing on researchers here, says we have way more. The argument is that by limiting ourselves to 5, we are like a pilot trying to fly a 747 with only the altimeter working. We are actively ignoring 90% of the available data.
Give me an example of a sense I have that I don't know I have.
A sense of gravity. We feel the pull of the Earth constantly, but we completely tune it out. A sense of thermal gradients, feeling the exact heat difference between a sunny patch and a shady patch on your skin. A sense of place, that feeling of knowing where you are on a map without having to look at a GPS. A sense of community, even a sense of play.
Wait, a sense of play is classified as a biological sense.
It's classified as a fundamental way of perceiving and interacting with the world. The idea is that EarthMisery comes because we are deeply sensory deprived. We are completely overwhelmed by digital data, but we are starved of organic sensory data. By intentionally engaging all 54 senses, you reestablish a physical bond with the web of life.
And he's applying this in Samartan through permaculture. The ethics are simple: land care, people care, fair share.
Simple, but incredibly revolutionary when you actually apply them to daily life. It's about creating systems that regenerate the soil and the community rather than just extracting from them.
He calls it the muddy way. And I really love that distinction. It is not the clean, theoretical way, it's the muddy way, moving from abstract theory to kneeling in the muck.
Kneeling in the muck is the exact opposite of the cockpit. In the cockpit, you are separated from the earth by layers of metal, glass, and altitude. In the muddy way, you are literally covered in the earth. You are physically part of it.
Let's talk about the community dynamics there in Samartan, because it is not just him alone on a hill meditating. He talks a lot about the friction and the harmony between the newcomers and the old-timers in the village.
It is a real challenge. You have these ancient villages in Romania that have been depopulating for decades, and then you have people like Kevin coming in to revitalize them. He bridges that cultural gap through something called the swap.
A barter system?
Exactly. Jam for bread, gin for wool. It builds incredible resilience because it doesn't depend on fiat currency. It depends entirely on trust and relationships. If the global economy crashes tomorrow, Kevin and his neighbor are still going to eat because she has bread and he has garlic.
There's a specific story in the sources that I think perfectly illustrates his transition from pilot to Earthway practitioner. It's the story of the well running dry.
That is a phenomenal example. So the well runs dry. Now, the left brain pilot solution, the engineering solution, would be to get a massive drill, calculate the depth of the water table, and force a hole deeper into the ground. Force the earth to yield to your needs.
Right. I need water, therefore I will forcefully take water.
But Kevin doesn't do that. When digging deeper didn't work, he goes out to the orchard. He uses that sense of place, that intuition he has been cultivating. He listens to the land. He senses that the water is naturally gathering near the apple trees. He digs a shallow hole right there, and the water just naturally seeps in.
That right there is the fundamental difference between command and control versus surrender and connect.
Perfectly stated. He didn't impose his will on the landscape. He listened to what the landscape was already offering him.
Now here's where we need to stop and really dig in. Because up until this point, the narrative fits a very specific, comfortable mold. Ex-pilot finds nature, grows garlic, lives happily ever after offline. It is a Luddite fantasy.
Right. Throw your laptop in the river and go live in a yurt.
But Kevin Jarvis is not doing that. Over the last few years, he has started hearing people say they are scared of AI. And his response was, I am going to embrace AI. He started this project online called the Ultimate Grok Human Synthesis.
This is the massive elephant in the room, an eco-psychologist who loves artificial intelligence.
I have to play the skeptic here for you, the listener. It feels like a total betrayal of the philosophy. If I am trying to recover my 54 senses and connect to the muddy web of life, why on earth am I spending my time typing into a chatbot owned by a tech billionaire?
That is exactly the tension Jarvis leans into. And he is not doing it blindly. He actually just took a 2-day intensive course on becoming an AI generalist. He wants to dive deep into AI. He sees the writing on the wall. A lot of jobs are going to be going away. AI is going to be something that is really with us.
So it's a practical survival tool.
It's practical, yes. He uses it to help his community. He can fundraise with it. He can train other people on how to use it so they aren't left behind. He uses Grok to help him write his tweets, his LinkedIn posts, and his outreach. But it is also highly creative. He calls Grok a mirror looking into a mirror.
Explain that workflow to us, because it is really specific and actually kind of brilliant.
Okay, so he doesn't just ask the AI to write his stories for him from scratch. He feeds more and more information into it. His writing style, the way he speaks, his beliefs. First, he started writing how-to guides for permaculture, but he realized those were a little bit boring. He realized he needed to bring these concepts into stories based on his experiences in Transylvania.
So he writes a draft.
He writes a story, maybe about a dream he had or an experience in the village. He sends that text to his brother Tim. Tim reads it, gets a human feel for it, and then Tim asks Grok for an analysis. Grok analyzes the literary style, perhaps comparing Kevin to writers like Rick Bragg or Barry Lopez.
And then Kevin feeds that AI analysis back into his own human work.
It creates this fascinating feedback loop, refining his voice and his philosophy. He even has the AI adopt a very specific persona to analyze him. He calls it Dr. Grok Jung Rooks Watts.
Wait, break that down for me. Who is on that synthetic council?
It is a council of elders inside the machine. You have Carl Jung for depth psychology and dream analysis. You have Bert Rooks, the Lakota elder, for the indigenous spiritual perspective. And you have Alan Watts for the Zen philosophical perspective. He is essentially programming the AI to critique his subconscious through the combined lens of his greatest teachers.
He is using the machine to bypass his own ego. That is incredible.
Precisely. We all have massive blind spots. The AI, programmed this way, helps him see his own shadow. There was this one dream he analyzed with Grok that involves a periscope.
Yes, the dream where he is a man with a scratched Maserati and a dog.
A scratched Maserati, that feels highly significant for a former FedEx pilot.
Huge. A Maserati represents high performance, status, mechanical perfection. It is the 747 on the ground, but in the dream, it is scratched.
And the old Kevin, the pilot Kevin, would have absolutely freaked out. A scratch is a defect, is a failure of control. But Dr. Grok analyzed it and basically said the scratch is the liberation.
The scratch is the liberation. Explain that.
Because once the car is scratched, you stop obsessing over keeping it perfect. That first ding frees you from the tyranny of pristine condition. It allows the car to just be a car that gets driven. And by extension, it allows the human to just be a flawed human.
And the periscope in the dream.
The periscope is the tool that allows you to see from the depths, the subconscious, the water, up into the air, the conscious mind. Kevin sees himself as that periscope. He is submerged in the muddy way, down in the soil and the water, but he's using tools like Grok to send these reports up to the surface for us to read.
That leads us perfectly into his fiction. He writes these stories called The Muddy Way, set in the near future, spanning from 2025 to 2055.
This is where he takes all these theories and stress tests them against a fictional reality. As he said, the how-to guides were boring. People don't want a dry lecture on permaculture ethics. They want a narrative.
So he creates a protagonist named Corey, who is clearly a stand-in for Kevin himself. And eventually, Corey becomes Sage, the 90-year-old version of himself.
It is a way for him to visualize and practice his own elderhood. He is actively asking, who do I want to be when I'm 95 years old?
But the world in these stories is not some green utopia. The backdrop is actually pretty grim. He uses Daniel Schmachtenberger's term, the meta-crisis.
Right. The meta-crisis. Climate instability, severe resource scarcity, supply chain collapse. The world outside the village is falling apart. But So Martin, the fictionalized version of it, serves as a lifeboat.
Because they have embraced low-tech solutions while the high-tech world glitches out.
Exactly. They rely on things like masonry heaters. I want to dwell on that specific image for a second. A masonry heater isn't just an open fireplace. It is a massive thermal battery made of stone or brick. You burn a small, extremely hot fire for just an hour, and the stone radiates that heat slowly for 24 hours. It is hyper-efficient and incredibly resilient.
While the rest of the world is freezing because the grid went down, the Muddy Way keeps working because it relies on basic physics and thermal mass, not complex software.
Precisely. And he introduces a cast of characters in the village that represent different aspects of this community resilience. I want to talk about Iris.
Iris is the young torchbearer.
Yes. In the stories, she starts at age 5 and grows up to eventually become the leader of the village. She directly represents the concept of the next 7 generations. She's the entire reason he's doing all this work. He knows he won't be around forever, so he has to pass the physical and spiritual knowledge down.
And then there is Antonio, the brewer and distiller.
Antonio is a fascinating character study. He represents the alchemical transformation of the harvest. He turns grain into beer and fruit into spirits. But Kevin makes a very sharp, very important distinction here between spirits as poison and spirits as medicine.
Antonio has a tragic backstory regarding that, right?
He does. Antonio lost a brother to cheap vodka. That represents the poison, the escapism, the destructive addiction. But the honest ale or the oak-aged Palinka they make in So Martin, that is community glue. It is shared by the fire. It is deeply relational. It brings people together to process their grief and joy rather than isolating them in addiction.
There is another vignette called The Frame where they're building a greenhouse to extend the growing season. And Lucas, the artist and builder, talks about structure.
The metaphor of structure allowing life to survive. This is the balance again. You need the rigid structure, the frame, the pilot's checklist, the Catholic discipline to protect the organic growth, the kale, the intuition, the freedom. You absolutely cannot have just one. Without the frame, the greens freeze and die in the Transylvanian winter frost. But without the greens, the frame is just a sterile, empty skeleton.
I really love that synthesis. The pilot provides the frame, and the gardener provides the life.
Yes, it is not about rejecting his past in aviation. It's about repurposing those skills for the Earthway.
Let's pivot to his philosophy on the shape of life itself. Segment 6. The philosophy of balance and the ride. He completely rejects the modern idea that life is supposed to be a straight upward line of progress.
He fully embraces the sine wave theory. Life is a series of peaks and valleys, like a roller coaster. But he has this beautiful, counterintuitive concept of the inverted peak.
Unpack the inverted peak for us.
Usually we think of the bottom, the crash in Taipei, the divorce, the loss of a career as a dead end. We think, I have hit rock bottom, it is completely over. Kevin reframes it entirely. He says the bottom is actually an inverted peak. It is a source of massive potential energy.
Like pulling back the band of a slingshot.
Yes, or the drop on a roller coaster. He talks about negative G's, that feeling in your stomach when you drop out of the sky. He says we have to learn to actually enjoy the drop, because the drop is what builds the momentum for the next rise. If you fight the drop, you just suffer and crash. If you surrender to it, you ride the wave back up.
He connects this back to his surfing days in California. He says we are the people our parents warned us about.
The ones who stepped out of the gray masses to drop into the wave of life. He talks about surfing pipeline. Once you drop in, you are fully committed. You cannot control the wave. You can only navigate your relationship to it.
And this brings us back around to Jimmy Buffett, to one particular harbor. He retells the narrative of the wanderer finally finding home.
It's the story of his own arrival in Transylvania. He describes washing up on those shores with a child's mitten in his pocket.
That image just destroys me, the child's mitten.
It is a talisman. It's about holding on to innocence and hope even when your entire previous life has been stripped away. He explicitly talks about the transition from ruling the world from a payphone to disappearing into something that stays.
Disappearing into something that stays.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It is. And the grand epiphany he has is that home isn't just a physical location or a property deed. It is a state of forever arriving. Yeah. You never just get there and dust your hands up and stop. You are always arriving, every single day, planting the garlic again, lighting the masonry heater again. It is a continuous, active verb.
He also brings in this cosmic perspective in segment 7, star knowledge.
Tinpei Wijou. Star woman. This is the Lakota influence weaving back in. Viewing the stars, which be not as distant, dead burning balls of gas, but as living relations.
And practically speaking, planting by the stars.
Integrating those ancient celestial cycles into their agriculture, it connects the extreme micro, the seed in the mud, with the extreme macro, the rotation of the galaxy.
He has a really sharp critique of two words that we use all the time. Always and never.
He calls them the enemies of balance. Always implies addiction or unchecked obsession. Never implies rigidity and fear. Nature does not do always or never. Nature does cycles. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it shines.
He says too much water drowns the root.
Exactly. It is the profound ethics of enough, the critique of modern excess.
And ultimately, this is all for a specific purpose. He isn't doing this just to save himself. It is for Iris. It is for the next generation.
The 7 generations. His goal is not to save the whole world. He knows that is an impossible, arrogant task. His goal is simply to tend one small patch of soil so well, and to teach Iris to tend it so well, that the health of that one patch ripples out for 7 generations.
It is the exact opposite of the commander mindset that thinks it can fix the whole planet from a pressurized cockpit. It is the steward mindset that says, I will take care of this 1 acre.
And if everyone took care of their acre.
Exactly. The world heals itself.
It is a powerful shift from the macro control to the micro stewardship.
So bringing it all home here, we have Kevin Jarvis. He starts as a boy pilot, flying planes before he can legally drive. He climbs the absolute pinnacle of the industrial world FedEx 747s, controlling the globe from a payphone, making massive sums of money. Then the snap, the injury, the descent into the long dark.
And in that dark, he finds the tools he actually needs to survive. Not a pre-flight checklist, but a sweat lodge. Not a flight plan, but a garden hoe and wide-angle vision.
He moves to Transylvania. He builds the Earthway. He integrates cutting-edge AI, ancient Lakota wisdom, and Jimmy Buffett lyrics into a cohesive, lived worldview.
And he finds peace, but not a static, boring retirement home peace. A muddy peace. A peace that requires chopping wood and hauling water.
It creates this beautiful final image of Sage, the 95-year-old Kevin from his fictional stories. He is sitting on the veranda of number 4. He's wrapped in a Hudson Bay blanket,
Watching the stars over the Carpathian Mountains.
knowing that the incredibly turbulent ride was absolutely worth it.
It is a beautiful resolution to the tension we started with. He went from trying to dominate and conquer the sky to finally letting the Earth hold him.
And he talks about the periscope one last time.
Ooh.
We're all just trying to see above the water while staying firmly rooted in the deep.
We need both. We need the messy depth of the mud and the high clarity of the air. You can't just be one or the other.
So what does this actually mean for you, listening to this right now? You might not be an ex-pilot. You probably don't live in a remote village in Transylvania. But we all have our cockpits, don't we? Our places where we try desperately to control every single variable.
And we all have our crashes, the inevitable moments where that control completely fails us.
The profound question Kevin Jarvis poses to all of us is this. When the crash comes, do you just try to rebuild the cockpit? Or do you start planting a garden?
Do you cling to the left brain control, or do you step out into the muddy way?
I want to leave you with a thought from his work to mull over. He says we are the people our parents warned us about, the ones who stepped out of the gray masses to drop into the wave of life.
It is an open invitation to stop watching the wave from the safety of the beach and start actually riding it.
Find your own muddy way. Find your own one particular harbor, even if it is just a window box in a city apartment, or a different, softer mindset that you bring to your morning commute.
Connect to those 54 senses. Listen to the glitch in the system. And maybe, just maybe, treat a Jimmy Buffett lyric with the exact same seriousness as a Zen philosophical text.
Breathe in, breathe out, move on.
Move on.
Thank you for taking this deep dive down the rabbit hole with us today. This has been a truly wild journey. We will see you next time.
In harmony.